وعلى نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تفتح لنا أبواب الرضا والتيسير وتغلق بها عنا أبواب الشر والتعسير. أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. The chapter we're covering today should give many people ease. And this is the crying of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that every dars, every dhikr, everything that is done in this masjid be in the skill and of hasanat of Dr. Mu'inuddin. Qulu ameen. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil alameen. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as you all know, was he an angel or was he a man? Man. So a proof of his humanity is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as you and I experience emotion, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also experienced emotion. And one of those emotions was, of course, at times sadness. At times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبَكَ. And crying is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us as really a gift. That through crying and through tears, we're able to let out our emotions. Through crying and tears, we're able to heal. I know many people that when they cry after, you feel a sense like your chest has just been opened. It's as though whatever was really bothering you, when you cry, it's as though it's relaxing to you. So never be afraid to cry. Whether it be in front of people, whether it be by yourself, never be afraid to cry. Men cry as well. And I literally, subhanAllah, spoke about it last week. But we'll specifically talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in some of the instances where he cried, as mentioned in Shamaa'il al-Tirmidhi. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was bashar. Was he not human? Yes, he was human. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was also Rasulullah. And so he's قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ. And so just as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam experienced emotion like we do, and he cried as we do, but there was prophetic guidance in it. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he would cry and he would have a sound like it's a boiling pot, but he would never wail, ﷺ. He would never wail. Crying, and it's as though you're unpleased, you're not pleased with the qada of Allah, you're not pleased with what Allah has decreed. The Prophet ﷺ never wailed. And even when he laughed and when he smiled with the Sahaba, he would, a small chuckle, smile until his teeth would show. But would he ever laugh out loud and do qahqaha very loudly? No. So again, the Prophet ﷺ, even in the way he cried, in the way he laughed, there was prophetic guidance sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the hadith of Shamaa'il al-Tirmidhi, the first hadith, the Prophet ﷺ in Qiyam al-Layl, okay, he was crying and whilst he was praying, and it made the sound like a boiling kettle. Like when you're boiling water and the kettle. That sound was being heard from the Prophet ﷺ in his chest, okay, due to his weeping. That is the sound that the Prophet ﷺ used to make whilst he ﷺ used to cry. The Prophet ﷺ in the next hadith, and I won't take too long on them. The Prophet ﷺ, he asked Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the great Sahabi who was a great scholar of Islam and a great mufassir of Quran. He said, recite the Quran to me. So it's good to read Quran and also listen to the Quran. He said, I said, Ya Rasulullah, shall I recite it to you when it was revealed to you, Ya Rasulullah? How can I recite it to you and you're the person who's getting the wahy? He said, I love to hear it from other than myself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he recited until he reached, وَجِئْنَا بِكَ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ شَهِيدًا. He said, وَجِئْنَا بِكَ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ شَهِيدًا. And until he reached that verse, we bring you as a witness over all of them. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he turned, Ibn Mas'ud, he saw that the blessed eyes of Rasulullah ﷺ were streaming with tears. Because he's thinking on the day of judgment, when he will have to testify either for his ummah or against his ummah. And the Prophet ﷺ was sad, because there will of course be people in the ummah that deviated, that didn't do as they should have. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he was sad that وَجِئْنَا بِكَ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ شَهِيدًا, that he would have to bear witness and testify for all of them. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he's going to intercede on behalf of all of us. شفاعتي لأهل الكبائر من أمتي. My intercession is not for the awliya, for the righteous people, only them. It's for those people that made the major sins. So look at the generosity, look at the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his rahmah for the ummah, that he would put his hands up and he would say, Ummati, 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 Ya Rabbi my ummah, Ya Rabbi my ummah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us al-shafa'a al-Muhammadiyah and to grant the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam al-maqam al-mahmud. The next hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I won't go through all of it because we covered it recently, as you remember, 2 weeks ago where we had the solar eclipse. And I spoke about the incident where the Prophet ﷺ, on the day his son passes away, Ibrahim, his own beloved son, Ibrahim. Wallahi, I cannot even sometimes imagine the things that Rasulullah ﷺ went through. There was a beautiful dua, I forget it now, the dua that he made after Ta'if. He was crying to Allah and he was complaining to him, not complaining to him, but he was having this conversation with Allah. That dua after Ta'if is so beautiful. But the Prophet ﷺ on that day, he still has to lead, he still has to pray, he still has to give da'wah, he still has to remind. This was Rasulullah ﷺ, and we hope that we're still following in his path, Ya Rabbil Alameen. The Prophet ﷺ, as you know, when he led, there's the way that the Hanabila, they do it. Allahu Akbar, then go to ruku', Allahu Akbar, Sami Allahu liman hamidah, then another recitation, and long recitation, then ruku', and then you go into the second rak'ah. I discussed it in the solar eclipse video for those that want. And so the Prophet ﷺ did this, and he began to sigh and weep in the salah. And he was saying, Ya Allah, have you not promised me that you will not punish them while I am in their midst? Ya Allah, have you not promised me that you will not punish them while they beg your forgiveness? وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ. We are ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So we should say sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we are also told that we will not be punished so long as we do istighfar. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. And Allah, then he said, and we beg your forgiveness, Ya Allah, Allahumma ighfir lana. After he offered 2 units of prayer, the sun reappeared, whereupon the Prophet ﷺ stood up, he praised Allah, and he said, the sun and moon, the day his son passes away, the sun and moon are signs from the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse because of the death or life of anyone. So when they eclipse, hasten to the remembrance of Allah on the day his son passes away. Cannot even imagine, put into words, what the feeling of Rasulullah ﷺ was at that time. And the next hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sallu alayhi, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he picked one of his daughters or granddaughters as she was nearing death. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu buried all of his children except who? Fatima. He held her in his blessed arms, and then he put her down in front of himself where she passed away. Ayman, the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ummi ba'da ummi, my mother after my mother. We know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was born without, his father passed away before. And his mother passed away when he was 6. And when he visited her grave, he cried like a weeping child, like a small child, subhanAllah. Can you imagine the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he still remembers the first 6 years of his mother, but the one who took care of him, Ayman, who was also one of his wet nurses, she took care of him all the way until he passed away. So she was with him his whole life. The only person that was with him his whole life, Ayman. So she started to weep loudly, because this is like her grandchild, grandbaby as well. Whereupon the Prophet ﷺ, he asked her, he said, do you weep in the presence of Rasulullah? Do you weep in the presence of Nabi Allah? Does he mean your crying is bad? No, but he's saying wailing, crying loudly as though you're displeased with the qada of Allah. And she said, but have I not seen you weep, Ya Rasulullah? He said, I do not weep like that. Rather, out of mercy, it is rahmah. Some people say that when some calamity happens or someone passes away, that I'm pleased with Allah, that's why I'm not crying. No. You're pleased with what Allah, with the decree of Allah, but at the same time, your heart is supposed to be soft enough that you're supposed to cry. It's mercy in your heart that when you know that someone beloved to you has passed away, that you shed tears. هذا من رحمة الله. This is from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. We ask you, Ya Allah, to soften our hearts. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the believer enjoys a good state at all times and praises Allah, exalted and sublime is He, even whilst his soul is removed from his body. That the believer is always pleased with the qada of Allah Azza wa Jal. And like Dr. Munir said, that on his deathbed, he looked like he was so fresh, subhanAllah. The believer, even on his deathbed, he looks fresh. And even recently, Brother Khalid Chaudhry, when he passed away, wallahi, when I looked at him, he looked so happy and looked so pleased in his face. Wallahi al-azim. And these were people that served our community. And even scholars of the recent generation, Sheikh AbdulRazzak Al-Halabi, who was the Sheikh of the Qur'an of Sham, on his deathbed, he was smiling and he was holding the Qur'an. Look at what a beautiful death. Allahumma inna nas'aluka husna al-khatima. We ask you, Ya Allah, to give us a khatima that we are smiling and pleased to meet you, Ya Allah, that we are looking forward to meeting you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. That when we come into this world, we are crying, and when we are leaving into this world, people are crying. The Prophet ﷺ, only 2 more hadith left, on when his brother from nursing, his nursing brother, Uthman ibn Mad'un, he passed away. The Prophet ﷺ was crying. At the crying of his brother through nursing, he was crying. And the Prophet ﷺ, he kissed him. He kissed him. And even Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, what did he do? He kissed him. And he said, طِبْتَ حَيًّا وَطِبْتَ مَيْتًا. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you lived beautifully and you passed away beautifully. We ask you, Ya Allah, to allow us to live beautifully and pass away beautifully. The last hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, they said, we witnessed, Anas ibn Malik, we witnessed the burial of a daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. This was the wife of Uthman radiallahu anh. And the Prophet ﷺ was sitting next to the grave. I saw his blessed eyes streaming with tears. This is his daughter he's burying. And then he asked, is there anyone amongst you who has not been with his family tonight? Basically, okay, I'll explain the ruling. Abu Talha said, I haven't, meaning he didn't have any relationship with his family. The Prophet ﷺ told him, enter. So he entered into the grave and he put it. Do women have to bury women, or can men bury women? Men can bury women. Who's given preference to be able to take the body? The maharim, the mahrams, the father, the husband, the brother, the uncle, the son, these people. The maharim are given preference. Let's say they're busy, they're not there, whatever it may be. Can other men bury them? Yes. This can also happen. But the Prophet ﷺ gives us a prophetic wisdom, and of course, we don't go out and ask this in the janazah area. But the Prophet ﷺ, to teach us, he said, whoever hasn't been with his family, then he should do it. Because a person who has been distant from his family for a long time, or let's say he is unmarried, or let's say he is old in age, then this person should be given preference because the desire and shahwa is far, far away from his mind. Again, these are just prophetic times. Look, Rasulullah ﷺ, at the burial of his daughter, he's still teaching us religion. This is Rasulullah ﷺ. We ask you, Ya Allah, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa Nabiyyina Muhammad. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant mercy on our beloved brother and father figure, Mu'inuddin Ahmad. We ask you, Ya Allah, to have mercy on him. Ya Allah, we ask you, Ya Allah, to shower him with mercy. We ask you, Ya Allah, to make his grave a garden from the gardens of paradise. Ya Allah, we ask you to give patience and ease to the family. We ask you, Ya Allah, in this next stage of their lives, Ya Allah, that you grant them peace in their lives, Ya Allah. That you grant them patience, Ya Allah. And now that hole is left, that you fill it with your nur, Ya Allah. That you fill it with iman, Ya Allah. That you fill it with your remembrance, Ya Allah. And just as you, Ya Allah, wallahi, Brother Mu'inuddin, he's in a good state now. We're crying over him because we miss him. But he's in a much better state. Imagine passing away in that state where he was attending 5 daily salawat. Every opportunity of generosity he was giving. Ya Allah, we ask you such a khatimah. Ya Allah, we ask you that we meet him in Al-Jannah. And we ask you, Ya Allah, that we are allowed to sit with him. And we sit with Uthman radiallahu anhu and all of the Prophets alayhi wassalatu wassalam. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I purchased this book, Dalail al-Khayrat, for the masjid. Today, I'm not going to recite it. Inshallah, we'll start from next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. This book is a collection of salawat ala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You know, all beautiful, beautiful different ways. For example, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, as-siraj al-wahaj, al-makhsus bil-khuluq al-azim, all with tashkil as well. I bought copies for all of us so that we can always send salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the masjid with this beautiful book. This used to be in Masjid Nabawi, Masjid al-Haram as well. They removed the copies, but again, this was something that was read across all of the Muslim world. We're going to bring back that tradition, inshaAllah ta'ala. And we ask you, Ya Allah, that each word, each letter that comes out of our mouth, goes in his hasanat, Ya Rabbi. It goes in his mizan, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, encouraging you all, please be tomorrow there at the janazah, inshallah ta'ala. It'll be at Salahuddin Graveyard Center at 2 o'clock, inshallah ta'ala.